Good morning, Year 12s. A lot of you have been emailing me asking me general questions about hypothesis testing. So I thought I'll make a short video about why we do hypothesis testing and what the general characteristics are. So, first of all, very importantly, is to understand that hypothesis testing is done when we are trying to test a claim about a population by looking at something to do with its sample. Okay, there are a few main things to understand with hypothesis testing. First of all, is that there are two types of tests. There are one-tailed tests. This is where we are testing whether something has been underestimated or overestimated. There are two-tailed tests as well. This is where we are not sure whether it's underestimated or overestimated, but we reckon that it is different to what the claim has been made. For example, a driving instructor claims that 70% of his candidates pass first time. An inspector thinks that this is inaccurate. So this is where the inspector doesn't know whether the claim that's been made, that 70% of the candidates pass first time, is overestimated or underestimated. So the inspector thinks that this is inaccurate. This is where you know the null hypothesis would be that the probability is 0.7. The alternative hypothesis would be where the probability is not 0.7. So we have no idea whether it's going to be more people that pass the first time or less people that pass the first time. So this is the notation. Now, one way to test that would be for us to look at how many people in the sample have been claimed to pass first time. So if I continue with the question, the inspector does a survey of 25 former candidates and records the number who passed the first time. So now what we can do is we can look at, well, how many people were passed out of those 25 first time, and look at whether it's significant or not, depending on the significance level that is given to us in the question. Now, in this case, the significance level that's given to us in the question is 10%. So, what is significance level? In general terms, significance level is the sort of scrutiny that we're going to put our test under. When we look at a very less significance level, so 1% and 0.5%, that's when medical situations are used. They're used in those types of scenarios where you want your chance of being wrong very, very less. Okay, so before a new medicine can be released for public use, it has to go through a rigorous testing process. Now, within that process, what you want the significance level to be is quite small, it's quite tight. However, in something like sort of driving instructor scenario or heads and tails scenario, we don't mind the significance level to be 10% or 5%. However, the bigger the significance level, so if we're doing a 20% significance level, we would have to do more tests afterwards to ensure that the conclusion that we've made has been supported well enough. The tighter the significance level, so 1% and 0.5%, they're good enough on their own, and we can go ahead with our conclusion without having to think about whether we may have made a wrong conclusion on the basis of that. Okay? Depending on what our significance level is, we have something known as the critical region. Now, critical region on a one-tail test is sort of, if I draw the diagram like this, it's a normal distribution curve. It can be either on the top tail or it can be on the bottom tail. That number there, out of how many we're looking in the sample, is the rejection region. So this is an area of extreme values clustered together where we would say, we can reject our null hypothesis and accept whatever the claim was. So if we look at our question that we looked at in the beginning, let me make up. So if 70% of people pass originally, and let's say the inspector claims it's actually less than that, that means out of those 25 people that we're looking at, how many people would have to have not passed for us to reject that claim and say actually it's much less than that that needs to be done. If we're looking at a two-tailed test for critical region, then we're looking at either way. So if I make up some numbers here, let's say the significance level for this test is 5%. So if this significance level is 10%, we split it up. So 5% significance level will go at the bottom end of the tail, 5% will go to the top end of the tail. And let's say our critical values are 14 and 21. So we're looking at 25 people altogether. That means out of those 25 people, if 14 or less have passed the first time, if it's a two-tailed test, that means we can reject the null and say actually the probability is not 70% that people pass the first time. So if out of those 25 people, let's say 10 people pass the first time, that means the driving instructor is overestimating his chance of success, his claim that candidates pass 70% of the candidates pass the first time. And looking at the top end again as well, if out of 25 people, 21 or more students have passed the first time, then he's underestimating it. That means more than 70% passed the first time. But because this was a two-tailed test in this context we were looking at, we are going to be concluding, since the regions are 14 and 21, that means any value less than or equal to 14 and any value greater than or equal to 21 would lead us to reject the null and conclude that there is sufficient evidence for us to reject the null and accept the inspector's claim that the 70% of the candidates passed first time is actually not true. Okay, so if we were to find any value within this region or any value within this region to be true of those 25 candidates. If, however, out of this 25 people, we found that 19 passed the first time, which is in the acceptance region, so that's in the middle, that is not sufficient enough evidence for us to reject the null and accept this. So we would then have to say there is insufficient evidence for us to reject the null. This means that the inspector who thinks that the claim was inaccurate is not true. There isn't enough evidence for us to accept with his claim. That means 70% of candidates must indeed pass the first time, looking at the sample that we're looking at. I hope this makes sense. I know it's a short video compared to an hour of the lesson that you guys normally have. I will post another video to do with critical regions and a two-tailed test, so hopefully that will make a bit more sense. Any questions, please keep emailing me, keep posting on Google Classroom, so hopefully I can keep helping you out. Take care, stay safe, bye.